Canada is changing its immigration system. The country is now prioritizing people who have experience in the tech sector. Ottawa has recently started inviting some people with particular experience in science, tech and math, or STEM as the system is called, to apply for permanent residency right away. So why tech experience and why now? For a closer look at the change, we're now joined by Joel Sandeluk, immigration lawyer. Good morning, Joel. It's good to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this in greater detail. Talk to us about the focus of this program.
So this represents a shift from Canada's immigration policies, which for the past several years have focused on visa students who have open work permits, people who are able to come to Canada, find work in their field, regardless of that field, so long as the work is at a sufficiently highly skilled level. What's happening now is that the Canadian government is focusing on a particular industry and decided that there are, for whatever reason, tech workers are going to be the future, going to be in demand, and has promoted that field. They've been pursuing it very, very aggressively, unusually so. Just earlier last month, what they did is they invited people who were in the United States on H-1B visas to have open work permits. 10,000 people. It was a program that filled up in less than a day. Wow. And it's unusual for Canada to do this, essentially pick the pockets of a foreign country in order to bring their highly skilled workers here. So this is a massive transition.
So why was this transition, this change in strategy needed in the first place?
I'm not sure that it was actually needed. There was a decision in Ottawa, I imagine, that this type of industry was in demand. Employers were struggling finding workers. And what happened was that the Canadian government wanted to make sure that those employers had the workers that they needed. So what they decided to do was focus on this particular industry. It's hard to even say when this decision was made, but the program is just coming online. It was only announced a month and a half ago, and what's going to happen is there will be new programs announced coming forward in the coming months and presumably years, possibly.
But here's my question. This year alone, we have seen how the tech sector has been hit hard. So people must be wondering, while the country is inviting people in the STEM, the sector isn't doing that well, many would say.
You know, it's funny. One of the things that Canada's been doing very well with immigration recently has been not focusing on particular industries or particular sectors of the economy. What they've done instead is focused on people who come here, acquire skills, acquire Canadian work experience. This represents a little bit of a departure because the Canadian government isn't necessarily great at responding to labor market needs. What happens is the government has to transition relatively quickly when a new industry emerges or one industry slumps. And so now what you're seeing a program coming into place that doesn't really feel like it's responding to a current labor market need. Oh. They may be focusing more, I suppose, on longer term needs, and they might just say, well, this is just currently a hiccup or an adjustment. But this is one of the things that's a change, and it's funny because the concern that I have is that this may force out other people who would otherwise be immigrating to Canada, people who have skills, Canadian experience, sometimes years in Canada studying or working. So the concern that I have is that this type of program will shift immigration away from people who might otherwise be eligible.
Because previously it was all about quote-unquote skilled workers versus now we're focusing on this particular program. But how is it really going to work in terms of selection and application process? Everybody in these 4 or 5 categories will eventually get a PR? Is it going to be that simple?
It won't necessarily be that simple. What's going to happen is everybody in those categories will be eligible initially at least for open work permits, and after they find work in their field, that will be a pathway to permanent resident status. So rather than simply coming here and getting your status, what will happen is you'll be here and you'll be on sort of a fast track to permanent status, provided that you can show what you're doing. There's other types of programs. For example, digital nomads have been on the rise, especially since COVID. Canada wants to attract more and more people who are, for example, working at a job in San Francisco, but maybe living in Calgary.
Right.
And so what Canada wants to do is encourage those people to come here, partly because they'll be here, they'll be, getting paid from a foreign company, but they'll be working, they'll be spending their money in Canada or whatever, and then ideally transitioning to Canadian employers or starting Canadian businesses. There's a multi-pronged approach here that a lot of it makes sense, a lot of it's very interesting.
Right.
So long as it doesn't have the effect of supplanting the other immigration. There's a lot of non-technical companies that are trying to find workers in Canada, people with like retail chains, food businesses, and that's potentially going to be damaged by this program.
Indeed, but we appreciate you coming in and of course sharing your views on this development. Joel, thank you for joining us on Your Morning. Appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.